Well, hello, Endow ladies. Simone here, and this is going to be so fun because this is an interview with Claire Fyrqvist, right, Claire? Am I saying your name right?
Very close.
Okay, very close. So this is now a tradition on the Endow podcast, me butchering people's lovely last names. It's the first time I've tried to pronounce a Swedish Finnish-ish last name. So there we go. And I'm also here with Laura Zambrana, our director of content. Welcome, ladies. Welcome to the Endow podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Simone.
I'm excited because I was just telling Claire before we press record that we're just so excited at Endow to release this next study on Catholic social teaching. It's felt like we've been waiting forever. It's also been in the middle of a pandemic, which feels like an extra 20 years on top of our usual patience required. But I wanted to talk to both of you at the same time because Claire, you not only authored the study, but Laura, you conceived of this study. So it was an inspiration from your heart. So I want to hear your heart on that. And then also Claire, you just seem to, and I've only gotten to know you a little bit through Endow, but I've heard about you for years through my friend, Christina Dehan-Jolloway, which I had on the Endow podcast for the Advent series. We talked about Ratzinger's book, What It Means to Be a Christian. And she would just go on and on and on. My friend Claire this, my friend Claire that. She's just so amazing. And she'd tell me all the cool things that you're up to in your life. And she didn't use these words, embodies Catholic social teaching in her very being and personal vocation. But I mean, that's basically what I picked up because you've done a lot of cool things. So you're a wife, you're a mother of 6, right, Claire? 6? Yes?
That's right, yeah.
Pregnant with your 6th, and you said that you lived in a Catholic worker neighborhood in South Bend, and you help run a Montessori school. You have chickens. So Claire, tell us a little bit about yourself, you wonderful woman.
Well, let's see. I was actually a convert to Catholicism as a high school student, and had the very great blessing of going to University of Notre Dame. And I feel like I was just very formed by people who are very radical. And I always had a desire to be very radical in my faith. I think that was something that was modeled to me. Even as a Protestant growing up, my parents took us actually overseas as missionaries. And I think there was always this strong desire in my heart to be authentic and to be what a Protestant might call like sold out for Jesus. I was interested in the real deal. I didn't really want to just be going through motions. So I always gravitated to those kinds of people and those kinds of mentors. And God really just, allowed me to go on such a journey of discipleship, really under the inspiration of a lot of really amazing women and men. I would say especially a couple women that were just heroes of mine. It was really a joy to be able to write about some of them in this study, actually.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I heard also about your wedding. What an incredible event that was. Can you share just a little bit about it?
Well, my husband and I met through the Catholic worker community. We actually met over a sink full of dishes, and we were just talking about our life. Discussing music and saying jokingly like, ha ha, we should start a band. And then we did. We ended up starting this like very ad hoc little bluegrass Catholic worker band. And that
what I'm talking about, everyone? See what I'm talking about? Okay, keep going.
Well, it was a very wonderful time in life when everything was possible. So before you have 6 children, you can start band. But our wedding was really just like it was an expression of our community. Really, it was a sense that we had been really blessed by these amazing communities. My husband was in the MDiv at the time at Notre Dame. We were living on the street with the Catholic worker community. My husband was on staff at the worker, and so it was just sort of like a community event where everyone pitched in, and we had my students from the Montessori school were the little waiters, and it was just so fun to find a role for everybody. I felt like that was one of our goals, was just to give everyone a way to participate and to make it kind of like an old-fashioned barn raising where you just all do it together, and it was so fun, and there was a lot of live music and friends.
Yeah, very like like true solidarity, almost like a microcosm of how life should be totally. Just everybody has a role, place, it's organic, it's grassroots, it's beautiful, it's creative, it's happy. Yeah.
Yes, that was sort of a special time in our life when that kind of thing was really possible.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I've been dying to ask you for now, even though I didn't even know you were, but I just kept hearing about it and just the event that it was, but okay. So Laura, so you, tell us a little bit about your heart in wanting to study. Why did you want it? What does it mean for us to study Catholic social teaching? Just, tell us.
What's on my heart, Simone? So
tell me about your heart.
Me being me, I need to find some like data points here. So I actually found the email, Claire, that I wrote you back in September of 2019, and like why I wanted CST and like why I wanted you. And our CST study like perfectly answers my desires back in the September. So I was like, literally, I'm like reading the email. It's exact like what you gave us in the study is exactly like what I wanted. Okay, so my heart. So I've done Endow studies for the last 10 years. Love being able to encounter the church documents and like actually like have my life be changed through the church's teaching. So when you when you like actually read the words and you realize that like one of the words for me that's like huge is when Pope Benedict says that like objective truth became a person and that person like knows me and loves me. Like for me, when I read that and like wherever, probably at Notre Dame, all of a sudden it answered for me so many of my life's questions. So at Endow, I love how the studies are not just like words on a page, but they actually, when you read them, they change the way that you look at the whole world. So when in 2019, I was given the title Director of Content, so I had to kind of figure out what that means and all of that. So when we got like all these new study ideas, right? Everybody loves having ideas at Endow. So there are all these like different topics that were coming up. And the topic that for me, I really wanted our Endow women to encounter was Catholic social teaching. First of all, because it's when I studied it at Notre Dame, it was like a whole, when I went to graduate school at Notre Dame, and when I encountered these documents, all of a sudden, like I couldn't use the same categories that I grew up with in normal American Catholicism. All of a sudden, the documents from Rome over the last 150 years, from Leo to Pius XII, I should know all this really well, but to all these documents that I'm encountering, these popes encountering real social issues, I couldn't just use my American, like conservative, liberal, broad strokes. And I feel like often we get very broad strokey in American Catholicism. So I appreciated how I was pushed to a new depth by actually reading these documents and grappling with the problems of the time. So I wanted to provide for Endow women that same encounter with like, there is a whole, it's not just like, oh, what kind of Catholic are you? Like, that's not the right question. Like, it's, are you actually like meditating upon Christ's message in the here and now with your fellow Catholics? So the minute that I thought of CST, I was like, I have to see if Claire can do this.
Why Claire?
Okay, so you're like embarrass Claire, probably not. So Claire, I knew Claire mostly like through her husband and through Ben and Marianne. Ben and Marianne were in my class at Notre Dame, and they were like best friends with Claire. And I always had like a friend crush on Claire because I was like too busy and wanted to become her friend closer. And also Jess is another good friend of ours. And Claire just like, again, from like one step removed, just again, like you're hearing, just embodied like CST. It's like, I breathe and beautiful things happen. And you're just like, how? Like
she sold out on Jesus. She sold out.
Yeah. And like Daniel Rose,
that's right.
she just like imbues it, like everything she does. And Daniel Rose is another great friend of mine, and she's a great friend of Claire. So just like all these people that I admired, like all know Claire, and I was admiring Claire. So I was like, I wonder if she would write this for me. The other huge thing that I don't think Simone knows this. So when I was packing up my little house in South Bend and getting ready to move back to California, that was the same night that you guys did the Les Mis performance.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So Les Mis for me, everyone else grows up with Les Mis. Okay, I didn't grow up with Les Mis. I didn't like know about it at all.
Les Miserables, for those who are listening.
Les Miserables.
Well, the film.
Les Miserables.
I can hear my mother saying, Les Miserables.
So Claire and a bunch of the people at the Catholic Worker put on a Les Miserables performance at the Catholic Worker. So I was in this very like intense moment in time. I graduated from Notre Dame, moving back to California, trying to find my life purpose and my job and whatever, scrubbing my floors. And then I'm like, I gotta leave. I gotta go see this performance. And I had only seen the movie. So I hadn't like seen a play, or I hadn't like known the music my whole life. And they put on a full performance, like full costumes, full everything, to the point where like the bishop is singing and like an actual homeless person walks in the door because it's a Catholic Worker. It was an incredible evening. So again, I mean, that Claire is somebody for me who embodied like not just like she lived it out, but she also clearly like believed in what she was doing, and everything she touches becomes like humane and integrated and beautiful. Yeah. Sorry, Claire. Poor Claire. Like totally on the spot right now.
Like, I wish all this was always true.
She's loving this. Okay, so then since you brought up Les Miserables, tell me, because that actually comes up in the study. So let's move to transition to a little bit of the content of the study.
Yeah.
And what, I guess, Claire, what was the experience like writing it? And then from both of you, I'd like to hear, what, just some of the content and what women can look forward to, and why they should study it. Why should they study this?
Yeah, when Laura first proposed this sort of vast topic, it's a pretty I was a little overwhelmed.
Catholic social teaching, right?
Yes, it's a large topic. So I thought, like, wow, this could be approached from so many different directions. And I feel like we had to go through a number of, or I at least was going through a number of just ways that you could present this. And Laura graciously sent me some ideas from other Endow studies, and I just really loved the personal touch of Endow to tell people's stories very personally and not to get too caught up in the heady. I was a little intimidated by the idea of presenting all the teaching, because it can be very intellectual. The documents themselves are often written by philosophers. These popes they can be very heady, but I really loved the idea of being able to present story alongside of the teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's where the idea of Les Miserables came from. With each chapter, one thing that Laura and I bounced ideas off of was just to include story with a particular aspect of CST. And so how is it embodied? How does it kind of come to life through a particular story, whether that be a saint, or in the case of Les Miserables, it's a work of fiction, but I felt very moved by the idea of, in Enlightenment France, one of the most powerful stories of faith in that time, I believe, was like Victor Hugo's response to what was going on in France and all of the revolutions and all of the upheaval and really a destruction of the church in France and Europe in general because of Enlightenment thinking.
Yes.
He sort of takes this on through the person of Jean Valjean. And I think it's just like one of the most powerful stories ever written, really, about the Christian message. It's such a gospel story of redemption. Mm-hmm. So it was really special to be able to write that. I love Les Mis and grew up with the music and was so honored and blessed to be a part of that musical, and then to be able to write about it. And as I said, a lot of my heroes along the way, like Mother Teresa especially, and
Saint Gianna is in there.
Say it again.
Saint Gianna is in there.
Saint Gianna, Saint Therese. Yeah, it was just really special. And I really tried to focus, and with Laura's guidance, on women in each of the eras that these documents were coming out who really embodied
Catholic
these teachings. Like, for example, Edith Stein with solidarity, like the way that she just entered deeply into solidarity with her Jewish brothers and sisters and gave her life for them, really. And so anyway, it was just such a privilege to write it. Honestly, it was very transformative for me because I didn't actually do the MDiv at Notre Dame. And so I was encountering a lot of these documents in a fresh way. And it was just so special to be able to meditate on them and pray with them and then write. It was a very cool process for me.
That's so beautiful. And I love the fact that it's a historical, yeah, I mean, 100% when you say, yeah, write a study guide on Catholic social teaching, you're like, well, that's like everything, right? Because, like, what do you mean? So then take it historically, be kind of beginning in Genesis. And so we have this, the concept of like, and it wasn't called Catholic social teaching. It was actually called like Catholic civil teaching, and then the fact, the way that we conceive of Catholic social teaching today is modern Catholic social teaching, which in many ways starts with Leo the 13th. But the truth is that Catholic social thought is earlier than that. And in fact, when you talk about the French Enlightenment, the French Revolution, a modern Catholic social teaching was born out of a reaction to the fact that there was a revolution. It destroyed all the three essential societies and the social order, marriage, family, the church, and so forth. So it's we have to have our categories and understand like who the key players are in terms of modern Catholic social thought. But then I think this was something that was really big on your heart, Laura, that we talked about a lot, which is that in fact social relationships existed right from the beginning. So we need to let's just start in Genesis. Let's begin there. Obviously, this isn't a comprehensive study, but it is going to be, I think, a really nice introduction and taste and survey of kind of, and the fact that we don't want these social encyclicals to just remain on the pages as like super intimidating intellectual endeavor. Right. To see that, in fact, in some ways, to a great more or less, we're all living that because we're all living in relationship with each other. So then it becomes then a personal examination of conscience, right? Going through it. And I think it's a great time to study this study. It's a great time. And I was cracking up because just as we were talking about the imprimatur and all this kind of stuff, Bishop Barron just released his like CST collection, and then Ascension Presents released theirs Catholic social teaching. I'm like, hey, Endows and Stuff with the Holy Spirit, all the Catholic social teaching is coming out. So it's a great time for it, especially after what we all lived in the what are still living in many ways in the pandemic, and what we saw last year, especially for American Catholics, but of course Endow is global as well. So it's a great time. I can't wait for all of you listening to study this incredible study guide. I can't wait for this to be out. What else should I ask you in our last 5 minutes, our last few minutes together? What else do we need to tell our wonderful Endow family about this?
There's too much. I don't know. 5 minutes. I mean, I think like, again, for me, the big hope with this is what is for each of the women who encounter Catholic social teaching to be transformed, to read the historical documents, to read the examples at the end, each of the different saints. We talk about Moses in chapter 1, talk about Saint Gian, talk about Dorothy Day, think about Saint Therese. Claire does a really cool thing in chapter 2 with Nietzsche and Therese, and it's just the study guide will provide you a fresh set of lenses to look at your faith. So I'm really excited for people to get to encounter and read it and be transformed. And it's to me, I don't say you have to buy the study, but you do have to at some point in your life encounter CST. You to actually take the step to figure out what does it mean to be a Catholic in today's society, and not to compartmentalize to Sunday or to your personal prayer, but these things all need to weave beyond your categories and let Jesus open up your categories.
So Laura and Claire, my question to you is then how, because you said it was transformative, Claire, and I would say, well, gosh, Claire was one of those people that I've heard about for a decade who embodies Catholic social teaching. How did it change you? And then Laura, I want to hear how working through it as director of content, how it changed you.
I would say that I sort of had encountered CST through the back door of just a lot of people that I knew who introduced me to various figures. I almost feel like I knew the stories first before I knew the teachings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so much about the way we think about our faith and about the gospel is what I would call personalism, which comes up in a number of the chapters. and this notion of the person being at the heart of our faith. Like really, it's very simple. It's actually quite a simple idea that the human person should be at the center of how we think about everything.
Yeah.
And so what I think was so transformative was to see that fleshed out in these really rich documents, and to encounter these popes who were addressing really particular and really intense seasons of our history, particularly in the late 19th and then 20th century. I think I just had no idea like how much the church took on at that time in order to really try to save the human person at a time when we were being really just bombarded by imperialism and war and an effort on so many different fronts to destroy what it means to be really human. And I just feel like the church was at the forefront of saving that notion of what it meant to be human. And that was just like so incredible to read about, and then to be able to weave that narrative in and show that really from the beginning, God in the Genesis, and then all the way through scripture, and then through the church's authority and teaching, has been the biggest champion of the human person, like by far. And it's just so exciting actually, because it's not a political category. It's just like a deeply real human and glorious truth. I mean, it's just so
it's political insofar as human dignity ought to be the number one value of all of our political relationships, right? And in that sense, man is a political animal, but it's not political in that the human person gets reduced to these, at least I'll speak as an American categories, which don't always take into account, wherever you swing politically, the personalist principle that whenever we make judgments about the public square and how we ought to live together, that the dignity of the human person is the first point of departure.
That's right.
Thank you for bringing that up, Claire. That's awesome. Laura, and how have you changed?
I mean, it's a joy getting to work on it with Claire, and like just the process of watching. For me, I guess the transformation is I came into the church or into the fullness of faith probably more through documents than through stories. So to see Claire take these documents and like create narrative out of, I mean, it's just a joy to watch that transformation. And for me personally, I feel like definitely how God works on my heart, like starting the documents and applying it to my daily life. And so getting to see Claire do that in each of the chapters was very, very powerful. So for me, it's the transformation of like, yes, human dignity, absolutely. But then it's like, oh yeah, my dignity, my family, like my family's dignity, like my coworker Simone's dignity. Like it makes like doing the study like actually makes me think about like these big topics that I could talk to you about, but actually like living them out. And I love how Endow takes these big church documents and breaks it into like, but how do I like actually apply this to my life? And by me applying it to my life, then it allows like the gospel to be spread across our communities. So that's how it changed me.
Love it. As our beloved Ratzinger says, if faith doesn't become culture, then it's not really faith. So any concluding thoughts, ladies? This was just like such a pleasure to talk to you about this. Again, like we're so excited to get this out. So any last minute things? Anything that you want to say to our listeners, our women and our faithful men, those faithful few, those happy few that represent the masculine genius that listen to this podcast? Any final thoughts?
I would just echo what Laura said, that even if you don't end up doing this study formally, pick up some of the church documents on CST and just try to delve into some of the stories that are so pivotal, I think, in our church's history that really highlight. I just think there's so much there. And I think this is a good way to do it. The study is very accessible. I try to make it as accessible as possible so that you don't have to be in graduate school to read it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I feel like my parting thought is I feel like the implicit invitation and like at each chapter ends with like a different figure or a different story. And I feel like the implicit like 9th chapter is like your story. Like how are you entering into this like narrative of CST? And I think that I with no idea that there would be a pandemic when I emailed Claire. So like there seems to be like definitely a new moment in my opinion, and like how women are like entering into society, and like how we're meant to be to heal our families and our society, and like that to me, like you'll do that the best by actually knowing what narrative you're joining. So
what a great, in such a polarized, at least polarized American culture. Again, I don't want to always talk about America because CST we're the Catholic Church, we're universal, and Endow's universal as well. But what a great, proposal for Endow women to make to maybe people that they necessarily like wouldn't invite into an Endow group, but to say, hey, here's the CST study. It's a hot button,
yeah.
Way of thinking. What a great way to have the Endow study and the Endow group be kind of that safe space for authentic dialogue, and to get us outside of our ideological thinking or our
Right.
divisions or our cancel culture, and just say, hey, here's this like safe place where we can actually talk and grow in friendship. And I think that is a fantastic way to begin to heal the culture, is kind of opening up the dialogue when so much dialogue has been shut down. So anyway, thank you so much, ladies, and can't wait to talk to you guys about the study and what's it doing in our women's lives once it's out there. So thank you both so much.
Thanks, Simone.